Welcome and good evening. If you were here for our first show this evening, you were in for a treat. Tonight, we are going to continue on with our International Christian Apologetics Week. My name is Terry Hogue, and I am your host this evening, and I am joined with my co-host, Darwin Giles Jr. Welcome this evening.
Welcome. Thank you to be here with everyone.
Darwin is the vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party, so we are thrilled to have you here this evening, and he's also an apologist and has a lot of interesting things that he's going to be sharing with us tonight. I'm also joined here in the studio with a guest, Alex Karimli. He is the founder of Road to Christ. He's an apologist, a speaker, and one of the most gifted street evangelists that you could meet. We welcome him here from Canada.
Thank you.
And then we also have a couple of women who are joining us on Skype, Cynthia Suffern and Nell Brace. They are Christian apologists with the Southern Evangelical Seminary. Ladies, we're thrilled to have you here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Darwin, would you start us off with sharing a little bit about some of the topics that we're going to cover tonight?
Sure, I definitely will. We have a power-packed show, and we have some brief topics in which we want you to call in. We want to answer your questions. We want to hear from you, and briefly those questions and the topics that we have, starting with veils. We know within the Muslim religion, veils are emphasized. We would like to speak on that and describe the truth behind veils. Women worth less than men. This is a very important topic. When we think of women's rights, we're talking about probing rape, wife beating. We're going to be talking about divorce and remarriage. We're going to be speaking on men in charge of women, so it's dealing with the structure of the family, the structure of the home. We're going to talk about adultery, polygamy, prostitution, and homosexuality. These are very important topics. We want to answer any questions you have concerning these topics, and we'd like to hear from you. Call in. Our number here within the studio is 248-416-1300. Again, 248-416-1300.
Tonight's topic is called The Value of the Female in Islam. I want to read to you the scripture from 2 Timothy 3:2. It says, "In the last days, men will be boastful, arrogant, unholy, brutal, lovers of pleasure." And we're going to relate with that, with how Islam deals with women tonight. Let's start off with talking about the veil. Alex, you were sharing with me earlier about the veil. Does Islam require to cover themselves?
Yes, it does require, and I would like to read from a source we're called islamreligion.com about covering women. Hijab frees women from being thought of as a sexual object of desire or from being valued for their looks or body shape rather than their minds and intellect. No longer slaves to consumerism, hijab liberates women from their need to comfort, to unrealistic stereotypes and the images dictated by the media. Women wearing hijab have expressed that dressing modestly and covering their hair minimizes sexual harassment at the workplace. The hour of privacy created by hijab is indicative of the great value Islam placed upon women. Again, it's islamreligion.com. So I have about a few thoughts about it. First of all, in order to be consistent, I will, like my propose to Muslims, men also to cover their faces, because just to save women from they have to have lustful desires after them, because we know the man and woman are the same creatures, and we have the same problems. And we can look in a story of the Quran or in the Bible about Joseph. We have a problem when woman lusted for Joseph, and that's what happened after that. So I think women, also human, have the same sinful desire as men, but somehow in Islam that kind of neglect that fact, and Islam is mostly looking for to accommodate, to protect men from sinning, but not women. And another one, because Quran and Sharia doesn't even ponder about this idea, that's leading to conclusion that the main idea to face or hair covering indicates the only concern for well-being of Muslim men, not a woman. The entire purpose of the Quran and Sharia to protect men from sinning and protect men's property, which are wives, including wives, from being abused, and completely show lack of interest in woman's spiritual being. Among other statements, there are also indications that Islam is primary religion of men, and women are the true second to a man person. So, and I'd like to share the last reason from the same IslamReligion.com. Hijab also can be a symbol of piety, and it can be a sign of a greater inner strength and fortitude. A woman wearing hijab became a very visible sign of Islam in the West. While Muslim men can blend easily into any society, Muslim women are often put on a line and forced to defend not only their decision to cover, but also their religion. Nevertheless, women who wear hijab insist that the advantages of the outweigh disadvantages conjured by the media bias or general ignorance. Here we see how Muslim men are using Muslim women's dress to promote. It's a little bit passive way, but yet it's promotion of Islam, as we see how many Muslims are in our towns and in our cities, because we see mostly women, not men. So the woman, and as if so many of them are coming on the streets with a hijab or niqab, is an indication of Islam is present in our cities. For the woman, man is not such a case, I think, and that's also bring the blessing of Allah upon them, because they are doing dawah or evangelism. Thank you.
Cynthia or Nell, I was curious about what your thoughts were about this. Would you care to share?
Sure. I agree. I think that women today in Islam are, many of them use head covering of some kind. Women have done that for centuries, and it is a mark of probably insincerity, of thinking that they're obeying God, being closer to Allah, in doing that, being obedient in doing that. There are women in other faiths, such as Christianity, sometimes also had.
Absolutely.
I think the bigger issue is when we see the gradual use of that to exclude women and exclude them as people, actually, when complete covering is done. We know in Surah 33 that Muhammad had his wives talk behind a screen. So we see this kind of gradual exclusion of women, not maybe at first to honor them in some way, but then it just leads to further exclusion of them in a way to perhaps help control men, but in doing that, you're controlling. So we think that, I think that it's, in a way, it's kind of denying their personhood if led to an extreme where they're totally covered. So.
Thank you.
I do want to add that I think the important point here is that lust is not so much a physical problem as it is a problem from the heart. You can wear as much covering as you want and still be lewd in your thoughts, or even just your approach to men. And so there's, in the same way, I don't understand how it is the woman's responsibility to make this sort of provision for the lustful hearts of men. Why is it solely incumbent on her? So maybe agree with what was said before. If the women need to cover, then what sort of things should the men do to avoid being the same problem to the other side? I think that's a very good point. Yes.
Well, I would like to add on to that. Alex, maybe you could respond to this. Are men so weak in Islam that they require that a woman be covered so much?
I think that's implication, and of course it started with wives of Muhammad. He doesn't like anybody to look at his wives, and eventually it spread to all companions of Muhammad, Sahabas, and it went to became a rule for Sharia. So we can talk about what actually caused that to start, and I think we can use that example of Muhammad. He didn't like this idea, but of course Muslims will argue it's a decree of Allah, and he wants to protect women from man's lustful thoughts.
Well, let's
That's it.
continue with that, but I know that Darwin wanted to add something.
Yes, I just wanted to understand if I'm hearing correctly. So is it the hijab is basically used as a tool to control women, but I also heard that it is possibly a part of Sharia law, a rule of Sharia law. Can you expand on that just a little to help me understand that?
Because Sharia law is derivative from Quran and Hadith, and therefore it just rules whatever it's written in the books. So that's why, well, Sharia law, of course, it's expand probably more on that issue, and it will give you more reasons. Let's say, as I just read from this website, it's not Sharia per se, but it's actually, it gives you an understanding of what Muslims, how they look at the woman covering, and what is actually, how they justify it. You see, because it's piety, it's actually, how to say, it's give a freedom for women. It's not now they look at hijab as a protection and give opportunity to women to be accepted not by their looks but the input in the society. That's how they view it.
Wow, that is really interesting because hearing that to the non-Muslim world, it does sound as if the responsibility of a man controlling himself and having that responsibility to make sure that his flesh is dying daily, as Paul in the Bible says, is pretty much placed on the woman. And I think that is a little bit too much of a burden to bear. I mean, when you think as a woman, I don't believe a woman could determine whether or not I lust or do any of those things. I mean, that is completely myself and what's in my heart. And what I can allow myself to do and what I choose to do. So putting that responsibility solely on the woman or women in society as a whole is a bit irresponsible, I think, and more importantly, it's just not realistic. I don't think that is even a moral, ethnically right concept within Sharia law. But again, this is Sharia law we're talking about.
Well, Cynthia or Nell, perhaps you could answer this. In Islam, there's various levels of veil, there's various levels of dress, with chador, with burqa. Could you explain perhaps why there are these different levels of dress with women?
I think some of it has just progressed over the years, and with the degree of kind of stringent Sharia law that is enforced in more fundamentalist sects of Islam. Some give women more freedom to show their face. Some of it has to do with the interpretations of the law schools. There are different schools of law in Sharia. Some say that the women's face have to be covered. Some say that their hands have to be covered. So it depends on what school of law is also interpreting the Sharia for the woman as well.
Okay, thank you. Alex, what do you think about what Islam teaches that a woman is worth less than a man?
Well, again, I can only go back to the Quran as a prime source of that revelation or that idea, and I'm going to read from Surah 4 and verses 7 to and 11. Basically, it's in verse 11 it said, Allah commands as you as regards to your children inheritance to a male a portion equal to that of 2 females. So the male child will get to double what female of his sister. So, and it's come again from Islam, from the Quran, that's degree of Allah. In a verse, I think it's 176, it said, the male will have twice the share of a female. So again, this is Allah make it clear to you. So lest you go astray, because Allah is all knower of everything. So as a Muslim, you have no rights, or how you can even say, well, Allah, I don't think Allah is fair in that sense. You just follow what Allah said, because that's degree specifically, it came from Allah and it's stated. That's how it's supposed to be done.
So what happens if a family only has daughters?
Well, that's probably they just get the share. Well, of course, you have to have father, you have to have uncles, and it's
Okay.
so in that case.
Okay, I just want to remind our viewers that we are a live talk show and you are free to call in. We would love to hear your questions. Give us a call tonight at 248-416-1300. One of the things I wanted to bring up was that, you know, in Christianity, Paul speaks about the equality of people.
Correct.
We have, he says that there's no Jew or Greek, there's no male or female. Can you give us some thoughts about the differences between Christianity and the equality between men and women compared to what we've been hearing about Islam?
Yes, the Bible is very clear about, again, as you just stated, there is no male nor female. God is a spirit being, and how he perceives the human race in total. So from what I understand from our guest speaker, we did just hear that Islam does treat men and women different, or at least the daughters and the sons completely different, and this is a part of the custom and or culture based on what would be the Quran is the correct way of seeing this.
I think it's another issue we can address is also like man could marry 4 women, and plus you can have as many concubines as from a slave. You just go to war and get, you know, booty as woman slaves, and you can have unlimited number of them as well. But there is no such for the woman. Woman cannot have more than one husband. So therefore, it's also kind of inequality. Even yes, we do have in the Bible examples of, you know, polygamy, but as Christians, we follow New Testament teaching of Christ, and from teaching of New Testament, we know that it's for one man, it should be one wife, and that's how we address our society. But in Islam, is in the Quran specifically stated, you can marry 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, if you can be, it could be just to all of them. So it's basically right away we see it's inequality. Again, from the Muslim perspective of view, it's all good because it's Allah judgment. So who will debate that?
Well, we have a caller. Mark, welcome to our show tonight with the value of female in Islam. What's your question?
Hello, thank you very much. And great show. I did want to ask, why is the woman in Islam treated so badly?
Could you repeat your question, please?
Yes. Why are women in Islam treated so badly compared to Christians?
Okay. Cynthia or Nell, I'd love for you to answer that one.
I'll start, and then Nell can give her response. I think some of it came from the times of Muhammad. It's a shame-based honor culture, which we still see today in some areas of the world, where the man is to protect the reputation of his family. It's all supreme, his honor and his reputation. And if the woman is part of that family, his honor, his righteousness, his taqwa, everything depends on how well he is protecting his family and his women, because it reflects on him and his reputation and his honor. So I think some of it to begin with was that. I think it's a misunderstanding of men and women, just a basic inequality. And I just think they're seeing women as kind of their possessions in a way in that culture. And this inequality kind of grew out of that, as opposed to the Bible. As you've said, we're both male and female, co-equal heirs in the grace of life together, as opposed to, and for women, there's no separation of law. In Sharia law, it applies to family law, and as you've mentioned, it affects them so many ways, not only in inheritance, we see it in marriage, as you've mentioned, we see it in custody of children, we see it in a wealth of different ways, how the woman plays a kind of a lesser role in that.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. We're going to be taking a break in just a few short minutes, and Nooni Darwish is going to be joining us. But this leads me, Darwin, to what we were speaking about earlier. You have a friend that experienced, unfortunately,
mistreatment.
Yeah, I have a very good example of this that we can get into briefly within the show, but I wanted to kind of expound on some of the things we've pretty much said now based on the caller, Mark. What we're hearing now is these rules or customs are from a Sharia-based culture, a Sharia-based government, in so to speak. I mean, when you look in the Middle East, you see governments enforcing these rules, which shapes the society, the culture. This is the Islamic ideology. Looking back at Muhammad, as our guest speakers have spoke on as well. So it seems like it all goes back to Muhammad. And if Muhammad is the example and the person who has created these customs and these trends, we're seeing a population of people over the years who are just strictly following this, is what it, from what I understand, from what I'm hearing, which is completely the opposite of Christ, and how Jesus being the example for all, and how the Bible said to treat your wife as Christ loves the church, and all those important things where it was us being equal. You know, in Genesis, you know, you have Adam and Eve, you have them having equal dominion, you know, over the resources of the earth and management, and it wasn't a one necessarily being in more superior than other, and one being more subordinate or, you know, subservient to the other. And so that's what I'm hearing. That's a big difference, and we need to point that out more. We need to really showcase that and put that on the exhibit, because most individuals now are saying, hey, Christianity and Islam are the same. It's completely a lie. I mean, that's not the truth. We're completely different. And these are just a few examples.
Okay. Now, I wanted to apologize. I think you were going to say something before I cut you off. What would you like to add to this?
If we have a few moments, I think the short answer to the caller's question is Muslim women are treated badly simply because their revelation allows them to. This is what you find in the Quran and what you find in the life of the Prophet. So you might have individual Muslim men rejecting and objecting and saying, well, we don't treat our wives badly, but really that's besides the point. If the revelation allows for these things to happen. And on a more sort of foundational or philosophical level, if you look at the teachings regarding women in the Quran, it's always about women rather than to women. And so when men are instructed about how to treat women, there is very little instruction to women directly. And I think that reveals fundamentally a functionalist view rather than an essential view. Women are valued for what they bring to society, be that mothers or wives, protectors of man's property when it's not there, or his object for sexual pleasure. And there's very little in Islam that really affirms a woman in her essential value. That is, you know, what she brings as a human being to society, and how she is to worship God and honor Him in her life. It's more to do with how she should be treated, and so it's almost as if she doesn't have a voice. There's nothing to be said to her.
Wow, Neil, that is just powerful. That is outstanding to hear. That is a complete eye-opener. And as we were previously stating, it all comes back down to the ideology. It all comes down to the Quran. It all comes down to the prophet that has been put up as the model in which to conduct these practices. And that it is time to really, again, stress that as much as we can, because that is something I really have just learned from an even different perspective. And I look forward to sharing that same information. Thank you, Neil, for being able to share that with us, because that was eye-opening.
Well, thank you. I think it's time for us to go to break. When we come back, we will be joined by Nooni Darwish. We will continue our discussion about the value of female in Islam. And remember that you can give us a call tonight at 248-416-1300. We would love to hear your questions.
Stay tuned for the Trinity Channel event coming in May. The International Apologetics Marathon will be held May 18th through May 30th. 2 to 3 live shows every day. The International Apologetics Marathon will be coming in May. For more information, call 248-416-1300 or go to thetrinitychannel.com. This is the beginning of a new wave of programming at ABN.
Hi, this is David Wood from Jesus or Muhammad. As I'm sure you've heard, ABN faces some significant financial costs as far as keeping things running, but also they have some very important technological needs as far as new cameras and new equipment. I encourage anyone who can to contact ABN and to support the work. We'd also like to increase the programs we have. We'd like to have more programs like Jesus or Muhammad, more programs like Jihad Watch, but that is entirely dependent on donors like you. Beyond all this, there are security concerns as the number of death threats have increased, and so the security system around here is going to need some updating, but again, all of this comes down to viewers. ABN is supported through donations, and so if you're able, I encourage you this year as you're planning what to do with your funds. ABN is an excellent ministry to support.
Welcome back to the Trinity Channel. Tonight we're talking about the value of female in Islam. My name is Terry Hogue, and I'm joined by our in-studio guests, Alex Greeley, and also our co-host, Darwin Giles Jr. And we have two of our guests on Skype, Cynthia Suffren and Neil Brace, from the who are Christian apologists from the Southern Evangelistic Seminary. And then we are also joined right now with Nouni Darwish. She is an Egyptian-American human rights activist. She's a critic of Islam and the founder of Arabs for Israel and is the director of Former Muslims United. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Well, we've been discussing a variety of different issues. One of the things I'd like to bring up is why rape victims are often punished when they're the victim of the crime.
Shall I answer?
Yes, please.
Oh, sure. Well, under Islamic law, a Muslim woman, her body is awra. It means it's an offensive. It's offensive. And they place in Islam, they place the responsibility for anything sexual on the woman, and it's not on the man. Men are supposed to be the victims here of women's sexuality. Women are supposed to be the source of attracting them. So women are, according to Islam, are responsible when a rape happens, which is very, very, it takes away the responsibility of a man to respect women as human beings before being anything else, before being a sexual being. So she's deprived of her human rights under Islamic law because she can tempt men. So they view the women as human beings as a sort of temptation to men, so they must punish women if anything happens. And this is such a perverted way of looking at men-women relationships.
Absolutely.
Men-women relationships are supposed to be, we're here put on earth, like if you see how men and women relate to one another in the Bible, according to the Bible, a man should love his wife as the church, with all the respect and glory of the church. That is what women are supposed to be given. Unfortunately, in Islam, all they talk about is beat her, and she's deficient in brain and religion. So the view of women under Islam is very suppressive, oppressive, and also it's very dehumanizing. It's almost like a woman is just a piece of meat that a man can pull out and use when they want and throw away when they don't want to. And this is very unbiblical. It's opposite to the way the Bible looks at women.
Is there anything in the Quran or in the Hadith that talks about respecting women?
Very little. I find most of the talk about women in the Quran and the Hadith is constantly beware of women. They are deficient. They can lure men. They are not to be trusted. This is said in many hadiths. So in many hadiths, men are constantly being warned about women, women being compared to dogs. Like a man while he's praying, if he sees a dog or a woman, it's almost like his prayer is no longer pure. He has to go and wash. So women are not viewed as human beings like men under Islam. They don't have the respect. Men-women relationships are so hostile under Islam. It's almost like they are in a war with each other under Islam. Very different from the Bible.
You mentioned about wife beating earlier. Alex, what can you share about that?
I think I could just read a very famous verse from Surah 434. And those you fear may be rebellious, admonish, banish them from their couches, and beat them. If they then obey you, look not for any way against them. That's very famous ayat about beating women. But again, if somebody said, saying that in Islam there is equality, man and a woman, he should bring, to be consistent, he should bring a verse from the Quran which will also say that, Quran which will permit, I should say, the woman to admonish, banish, and beat her husband if he is rebellious and unfair. So we, as husbands, must admit that in many cases we're not doing right thing, what we should do. But somehow the Quran presumed that only women are on the wrong side. Only women could be rebellious. Only women could do something wrong. And it give permission only for men to correct them and to beat them. So, but the point is, it's indicate that Islam is a religion created primarily for men, and reserves female only a second place beneath a man. Therefore, there is no equality in Islam, period.
Cynthia, can you give us some examples, perhaps, of what reasons men might have for beating their wives under Islam?
Well, specifically, I was talking about if she doesn't agree to go to bed with them. The woman is supposed to be available for her husband anytime that he desires. If she's disobedient, if he worries that she's going to be disloyal to him in some way, maybe make him look bad, ruin his reputation, do something to dishonor the family. So anything that kind of reflects on him, I think, in any way, or it's her responsibility for upholding that. And so it really carries the weight of that. And I think it's quite a burden, actually, for women, because they're trying to be, if they're sincere Muslim women, they're carrying this burden of their own sins, their own inadequacies, and then carrying this the guilt probably from the pressure on their husbands, on their families. I'm sure there are probably some loving relationships among Muslims. So I don't want to generalize for all Muslim marriages, but I think the way that the Quran and the Hadith, the Sharia law, just kind of gives permission for this, for kind of the worst to come out in this relationship instead of having an honoring relationship, as we see between men and women that is advocated to have in the New Testament, that husbands are to honor their wives are to honor their women. It's a joint covenant relationship that actually I think goes to the beauty of God Himself. If I like to think about it actually as the nature of God Himself. We see the Trinity and we see the unity between the members of the Trinity. And I think in a Christian marriage, we can reflect that with each other. When we show honor, when we show love, and within the Godhead Himself, there is this love in Him that doesn't need His creation. Actually, He just models love. That's why we can say the God of the Bible is love Himself. The God of Islam is a unity. He is Himself. He doesn't reveal Himself. He's just to be obeyed, as the husband is to be obeyed. So I see that as reflecting actually the God of Islam, and I don't see a place for woman actually in that relationship to be modeling that. For women, we have the model of Christ Himself. And so in Philippians, it talks about how He was God, but He didn't think equality with God to be grasped, and He took the form of a servant. So when I'm being respectful to my husband, as a Christian, I can do that out of love, and I can say, I'm modeling Christ. There's something of God that I'm showing in myself as a human being. But I don't...
Cynthia, I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute. We have a caller. Hamdan, am I pronouncing that correctly? What is your question?
No, I want to make a comment. I don't know how many of you are Arabic speaking, but there is hadith to summarize it in Muhammad's hadith, which it says women are deficient in mind and faith, which in Arabic النساء ناقصات عقل ودين, which may help explain how the Muslim look down at women. They are deficient in mind and faith. So that may sum up, or at least relate to the topic that you are dealing with, why this treatment of women, both in inheritance, in social status, in whatever it is related to, that we sometimes, meaning in Western thought and so forth, regard as totally irrelevant and non-pertinent and anyway, I want to take you much of your time. You have a very, very exciting topic, and more power to you, and keep going. Okay?
Well, thank you for your call. Nell, what do you think about that women are deficient in our minds and in our faith?
Well, Muslim women have lived under this slogan which is a hadith, and for a long time. Actually, a lot of people in Egypt, when I was growing up, used to laugh and say, "Oh, النساء ناقصات عقل ودين." So this is a very well-known hadith, and many women have almost accepted it as true. And so Muslim women for 1400 years have lived to accommodate Islam's views on them. It's almost to accept, they have accepted their inferiority status. So they have lived a convoluted style of life just to accommodate Islam, to accommodate Sharia. And now you find some Muslim women who call even themselves feminists, feminist Muslims, who
That's
wear the
interesting.
hijab, with pride, and they defend Sharia. And some Muslim women defend Sharia. They even defend the statement that they are naqisat aql wa deen. They defend it, thinking they are being religious. So they defend their own inferiority. So this is the situation. Islam have produced women who defend Sharia. And this is the epitome of tyranny, is when you make the object of tyranny accept the tyranny. It's like a Stockholm syndrome.
That's what I was
whereby
thinking. Yes, thank you very much. I agree. That's what I was thinking as you were sharing, that it's just like Stockholm Syndrome. We have another caller, Matt.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yes, hello. I am learning a lot. Thank you. In this area of religion, I heard that a Muslim woman can marry only, or two men only, but a man has the right to marry as many wives as possible. Is this based on their Bible, or do they believe in the life after death? Thank you. I'm learning a lot from your shows. God bless you. Fascinating, very educational.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to turn this over to Alex. Alex, what about marriage and women?
Of course, as I stated before, a woman has a different status in marriage than men. Men could marry up to 4 women. Women could marry only one husband. And also, as we just heard from Cynthia, I think she said that about sexual life and how the woman is subject to desires of men. And here's I'm going to throw one hadith from, I think, Sahih Bukhari, which is stated that if woman kind of reject the man's desire for sex overnight, the angels will curse her all night. I mean, that's something spiritual, goes to spiritual realm. So if any woman said, well, I'm sorry, I have a headache or whatever, so she will be cursed by angels because she's not supposed to. And that's why, can you see how the man will defend Islam by all costs, by all means, because it's give men unprecedented authority and position over women. So who else will give that kind of right?
Nell, what happens to a woman if she does divorce her husband?
There is no right for a woman to divorce her husband. The right to divorce is only in the hands of a man. Not only that, but marriage, women, there is no age limit for marriage for a girl. So a girl can be married katb kitab, which means just the written contract. It can be done when she's just a child, and can be consummated when she's 9. According to Islamic Sharia, what kind of consent is that? And they say Muslim women can have consent. That's not true, because when you're underage, what kind of consent is that? Another thing about marriage of a woman, of a Muslim woman, her guardian has to approve it. And this is very difficult for a woman to marry somebody she loves. Many women, Muslim women who were in love, could never marry the men whom they loved, because it was not approved by her father, her uncle, or her brother. So marriage against the will of women is okay under Islam. Having sex with ma malakat aymanahum. So men are not only allowed 4 women, men are allowed even sexual slavery. And you see today Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, all of these Muslim groups, and they are following Sharia. They're kidnapping Christian girls. Almost 300 Christian girls in Africa, and they already converted them by force and married them by force to Muslim men. And the families can't find their girls anymore. The Yazidi women are being raped because in the eyes of Islam, a Muslim man who captures a woman in jihad, and jihad can be anything, he can convert her by force and have sex with her.
We have Nell Brace from the Southern Evangelical Seminary who I'd like to ask about this question as well. What about temporary marriage?
Yes, this is interesting. I've looked. I don't think that this is spoken of specifically in the Quran. This has to do with this is hadith teaching, and it comes from the time when the Prophet was out campaigning, military campaigns with these men, and they came and they complained that they had these sexual desires, and he okayed these temporary marriages, which I think reveals fundamentally perhaps the difference Cynthia was trying to point out there's a fundamental difference between Islam and Christianity when it comes to the idea of marriage. You see, simply by the Prophet permitting these temporary marriages, that marriage in Islam for a man in any ways becomes a legitimate form to simply fulfill his desires. And there's no reciprocity in that. If you don't mind, I want to go back to the verse that Alex read about the wife beating. I think this shows it in such a startling way. You know, the verse actually talks about three points of action that a man takes. He admonishes his wife, and then he shuns her from the bed, and then he beats her. So the last one is so startling that we actually miss the middle one. Where intimacy within marriage becomes almost sort of a weapon, if you want, in comparison to what Paul says, for example, in 1 Corinthians 7, that there is really no reason why that should be done. And so I think these temporary marriages reveal just that fundamental difference, where in Islam marriage serves purely a social function or a functionality. This is how we reproduce children. So you look at the divorce laws, the wife has to stay for as long as it takes to determine that she's in fact not pregnant, and thereafter really, she's put out on the street. So what does that say? She's really seen as the bearer of children, and that is her role in marriage and in sexual intimacy. And I think it's so the idea of a temporary marriage simply because a man cannot contain his lustful desires, to me is just that's astounding. That really is worrying. And I can't imagine being a wife at home having to deal with the idea that he is just allowed and in fact encouraged by the Prophet to do so. That is, like Cynthia said, it's a very hard burden to bear.
I think it's a very low view of men and women. I mean, the expectations are so low that a man can't control himself at all, and so you have to provide these things. And on top of that, the low expectations for women. You were talking about women being deficient in mind. There are hadiths of several hadiths of Muhammad saying that, like when somebody's asking him, isn't the witness of a woman equal to that of half of a man? And he says, yes, it's because the deficiency in her mind. He talks again to a group of women and says, I've never seen anybody as deficient in mind and religion as you are. So you see, even from his example, women are more of a property instead of a person in their own right. And in marriage, when he's telling them you can marry up to 4 women if you can deal with them justly, or you can take women at your right hand, which means they could take the slaves, the booty of the fighting that they've been in, and marry them as well. So we see that even from his examples in his later marriages and multiple marriages that he had, and they gave an exception for him to have many more than 4 in the Quran itself. So just contrast of his example with the example of Jesus is just startling. It's just revolutionary When you look at Jesus coming out of a Roman culture that didn't value women either, but he was so above that and so transforming from the Roman culture that thought of women as property, and the men had the right over the women in Roman culture. But Jesus is here interacting with women, speaking with them, loving them, loving Mary and Martha, treating the woman caught in adultery tenderly, forgiving her, saying, "Who's without the first sin, without sin cast the first stone," treating the sinful woman who comes and pours the lotion on his feet and just saying, "She's been forgiven much." He knew her past, just like he knew the past of the Samaritan woman. He knew her past, but he loved her so much to give her the water of life. So just a startling contrast we see between these two men.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, do we still have a caller in the line? Matt? Okay. Well, we would like to encourage you again to call into the studio. We would like to answer your questions, 248-416-1300. Again, 248-416-1300. I would like to say as well to Noonie Darwish, I'd like to say thank you because you were one of the speakers who spoke in Dearborn, Michigan for one of the very first civil rights events for Jessica Mogdad, my friend who was killed because of Sharia law and because of Islam and because of the very things that we're talking about right now. So I just want to say thank you, and I would like to just say as well, when you look at the treatment of women, when you look at the overwhelming evidence of what Islam and Sharia law is promoting, what solutions can we bring to Western society in order to make this not only known as we're doing tonight on these type of platforms, but what other solutions do we have in order to stop these things from becoming even more of an issue in America? I would like to hear Noonie Darwish to speak out about this and see what solutions can we actively promote. I would like to know personally because I speak all the time and I want to inform as many people as I can.
Well, thank you so much, and I agree with you. I mean, the United States and the West in general, Europe, the general public in America has no clue. And this is not because the public in America is dumb or don't want to know. It's because we have a media in the United States and in Europe. The media does not want to confront Islam. For some reason, at the governmental level, at the media level, there is a lot of misinformation about Islam. And it's very sad that the White House is inviting the Muslim Brotherhood. We see, radical Islam is being hailed as something good. So we are really fighting for the truth. And unfortunately, the American people don't know. Again, another thing about marriage between men and women under Islam, something that's very important, that regulating relationships between men and women, this regulation depends on the legal system. So the legal system in Islam permits so much injustice towards the woman that even if the man is a good man, if the husband is a good man, in time of trouble, he'd be seduced by the oppressive legal system against his wife. So, for instance, in the West, when there is trouble between a man and a woman, they go to counseling. Mm-hmm. In the Muslim world, when there's trouble, he goes and gets another wife. That's how Islam solved the problem.
And we want to continue this right after the break. We are literally 20 seconds from the actual break. We would like to come back and continue this discussion. This is very informative, and we really appreciate everyone. Please remember to call in 248-416-1300.
and we will have 3 callers who are waiting when we get back for their questions. Thank you for calling.
Channel event coming in May. The International Apologetics Marathon will be held May 18th through May 30th. 2 to 3 live shows every day. The International Apologetics Marathon will be coming in May. For more information, call 248-416-1300 or go to thetrinitychannel.com. This is the beginning of a new wave of programming at ABN.
ABN viewers, how do you watch our programs? Do you watch on satellite, online, or even through our IPTV boxes? Do you like to watch our shows on your iPad, your iPhone, or even on YouTube? Please contact us at 248-416-1300 and let us know which way you see it best.
I want to talk to you today about a very serious matter, saving our civilization. I'm standing here in the studios at ABN, which is a Christian broadcast station, but it is much more than that. We need not only to save souls, but to save our civilization. There are very few voices left in America which speak the truth, in particular the truth about Islam. This station is devoted to speaking the truth of Islam. And it, as I say, it goes beyond salvation. I'm standing here in front of cameras and a set, and all of this takes money. Money in a battle for our civilization. I study history, and it is interesting that I love to study the history of the early church. And we find that the early church was not only about the salvation of souls, but it was also about creating a new civilization. And today that civilization is under attack by Islam, and this station tries to defend our civilization. So I need for you to understand that this cannot be done for free. The Saudis pump an endless amount of money into the spread of Islam here in America and throughout the world, and we need to depend on people like you to contribute to the efforts here at ABN, not only to save souls, but to save our civilization. Think about what I'm telling you. A matter does not become more serious than this. So reach deep into your heart and give what you can. Give to save not only souls, but a civilization that we live in. Thank you.
Welcome back. My name is Terry Hogue. I'm your host this evening during our International Christian Apologetics Week. We're talking about women in Islam, and we've got callers on the line. First is George. George, welcome to the show tonight. What is your question?
Yes, it's maybe a comment more than the question is, let us tie the Bible, the Genesis, to the verse number 3 on Surah An-Nisa. Apparently, the Satan knows who to attack first as a woman, and through the woman is open the hell. I'm not stereotyped, but this is the reality. As the woman is much fragile and her love is internally. So Satan knows how to attack the human nature through the woman. And I'm praying every time to get you guys as a woman more and more apologetic, because we need a woman to go on the first of the line of the war against the Satan next to the man in apologetic side. And go to the Surah 4, verse 3. We need to go to the truth, even with her. Marriage, there is no marriage in Islamic. I hear you're saying, but mostly we fall into the marriage idea of a man and woman. Allah permits nikah, and I know Luna knows what the nikah means. There's no marriage in this idea. And because it's including the slave as well, so it cannot be a marriage idea. And without this, we have to be bold and get the woman into this uncomfort level to approach the woman Muslim, to tell them what you have in the Quran is not marriage idea, it's this idea about this sexual relationship. That's why the man is always manly, dirty to think about that. That's the only thing for the man to go, and Satan knows this idea. And I appreciate your time, and keep going with your good work. I appreciate it. I see my prayers coming to see 3 women in the show. And I pray for more, because a woman needs to be in the first line to go approach this woman, Muslim woman, in her house, in her school, in her club, to get to her, to get out of her darkness. And thank you.
All right, thank you, George. Nooni, he was asking you to comment on that.
Very good point he made about the concept of marriage in Islam and in Christianity are totally 2 different things. When I was a teenager in Egypt, I remember one time I was a teenager and I was watching an American movie, and I saw a church wedding. And in the church wedding, the man and the woman were standing facing each other, and the priest was standing, and they were reciting the pledge to one another. And the man was pledging loyalty to his wife. The man in the Christian marriage, he is vowing loyalty to his one and only wife. This does not exist in the Islamic marriage contract. In one of my books, I put the Islamic marriage contract, and in it, it asks the man, please name an address of wife number 1, wife number 2, and wife number 3, if any. So a Muslim woman goes into the marriage, she signs the contract knowing that her husband already has other wives, or if he doesn't, in the future, he can still have more wives. So a Muslim woman legally cannot expect loyalty from her husband.
Thank you,
Loyalty
Nooni.
is only...
I apologize that I need to interrupt, but we have another caller on the line. Daniel, what is your question, and welcome to our show tonight.
Hello. Hi. I'm watching your show now with my family, and I am so surprised that there's so much suffering women in the Middle East right now. And I just want to know, does this have to do with Islam or the Arabic culture? And is there any solution to the problem? Thank you.
Cynthia and Nell from the Southern Evangelical Seminary, would you care to comment on his question?
Well,
He was speaking of solutions, pretty much solutions to the cultural issues or Middle Eastern issues, solutions. Similar to the previous question asked, what solutions could we promote or focus on based on the Middle Eastern and cultural topics that we're discussing now?
Let me just say first, the first part of his question, is this due to the religion or is this due to the culture? Especially in the Arab world, these 2 things are hard to distinguish between, because Islam, in a sense, is Muslims will say it's not a religion, it's a way of life. And so the cultures have been influenced. And I think what is interesting to see is how a specific culture will take what is given in the Quran and enforce that. So, for example, the rape laws, that a woman needs 4 witnesses when she is accusing a man of rape. That's really an extension of what is supposed to be a protection for her when she is accused falsely of being unfaithful. But you see how the idea of sexuality is so warped that now in these countries they can take that and actually sort of turn it against her. And so it's interesting to see how the cultures develop this. So I don't think you can distinguish really between the 2. As far as solutions are concerned, it's difficult for us here from the West to change that. I think the gospel ultimately is what will do it, because you need the essential change in the character of men and women. You need women emancipated from this oppression, and men freed from the idea that they have these rights over a fellow human being. As far as the West is concerned, I agree with Noni that there just needs to be awareness. We need to move past this sort of ban in the media about speaking of these things. We need to get people to read the Quran and to read the biography of the Prophet and to read some of these hadith and to just become aware of what the teachings are, because ultimately this is what sanctions it. There's no point in pointing to good Muslim marriages or, good Muslim men that we see around us if this is ultimately what the revelation justifies.
Alex, I wanted to ask you some more about the treatment of women with marriage and divorce as well. I don't think we've even scratched the surface there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to again go back to the Quran. That's my favorite place to go. So it's Surah 2:30, but before I go there, I'm going to quote Surah 2, verse 228. And divorced woman shall wait as regard their marriage for 3 menstrual periods. And ideas behind it, it means it must be proven that she doesn't have a child from previous marriage which already been kind of annulled by the man. And here is a problem. The Muslims are claiming that the Quran isn't coherent with the science today, and we speak a lot about, we hear a lot about the Quran's actually give some information about only science today could discover, and it's a very scientific book. But here we have a problem because in order for woman to know she's pregnant or not, it's basically required to have only 1 menstrual period to begin after a consummation of the marriage or sexual activity. And I just read from womenshealth.gov information. If your menstrual period comes on time, more than likely you aren't pregnant. Generally, a missed period is the first sign of a pregnancy, according to that website. When you're pregnant, you usually don't have any menstrual periods. Then I don't understand how Quran is speaking that you have to have 3 of them in order to be sure you are not pregnant, which is not incoherent with the science we have. And now let us go to verse 2:30. And if he has divorced her, then she is not lawful unto him thereafter until she has married another husband. Then if the other husband divorced her, it is no sin on both of them that they reunite. They are the limits of Allah which He makes plain for the people who have knowledge. Let's wait a minute. Islam make very unique claim that it is third monotheistic religion. The Quran is confirming what was said in Torah, that Islam is the religion of Abraham. Allah is creator of universe, and Yahweh who sent Moses also sent Muhammad later on. And that's very interesting claim, but let us read back, let's read from the Torah, and I will read from Deuteronomy 24, 1-4, just bear with me. If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, give it to her and send her from his house, and if after she leaves his house she became a wife of another man, and her second husband dislikes her and writes her a certificate of divorce, give it to her and sends her from his house, or if he dies, then her first husband, who divorced her previously, is not allowed to marry her again after she has been defiled. That would be detestable in the eyes of the Lord. Do not bring sin upon the land your Lord, your God, the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Well, let's read the Quran again, that passage. If the other husband divorced her second husband, the first one, it is no sin for the first husband to remarry her again. When the Torah speaks, it's completely opposite. The Lord said it's detestable for them to come back again. So, wait a minute. If in the Torah Yahweh said that's a sin, somehow 2,000 years later, Muhammad claimed to get the Quran from the same God who sent the Torah. And in this new revelation, this God said, oh, it's okay to remarry. There is no sin. So we have a problem here.
And that's very important to point out. We currently have a caller on the line. Matt, are you there?
Hello. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask here. What I hear is the female has no rights, but only to man. My question is, what are the rights of a wife to her husband in Islam and in the Bible for the Middle East? And also, what does the Bible of the Muslim speak about homosexuality and rape?
Nooni, would you like to answer Matt's question?
Well, that's a loaded question.
You can handle it.
About homosexuality, of course, it's illegal under Islam, and but there is a lot of contradiction because some parts of the Quran talks about heaven and the young boys who are like pearls as gifts to men in heaven. So as everything else, Islam contradicts itself about homosexuality. I'd like, before I continue about the rights of women in Islam and Islam, Christianity doesn't have this strict legal system that Islam has. Islam has a very elaborate legal system that really gives very little rights to women, very little. All the rights that are talked about in the Sharia is against women. So the Bible gives general, but they don't have specific laws that are very detailed like the Quran, like Sharia, but it gives, it certainly gives honor to women. It treats women, it advises men to, I'm not really the best expert on the Bible, but advises men to treat women like the church. It advises men to, when they marry, to leave their family and become one flesh with a wife, with one wife. And that sums it up, really. But I want to go back to the question about Islam, whether it's culture or is it Islam. It absolutely is. It started with Islam because the Arabian Peninsula culture at that time, Muhammad clashed with his tribe in Mecca because they worshipped other gods, they had other traditions, and Muhammad defined the values of Islam, and his own lifestyle became the measurement of what a Muslim should live by. And that is how the culture of Arabia, after that, was affected by the life of Muhammad. So the life of Muhammad became the law of Islam, which impacted the Arabian culture. When the Arabian culture exploded and went all over the world, it took the same values which were in the Sharia, in Islam, and exported it all over the world. For instance, in Malaysia, there was nothing called honor killing before Islam came. After Islam came to Malaysia, and Malaysia now is the most populated Islamic country on earth, they have honor killing there. So yes, Islam came first, culture came second, and now they are totally connected, the culture and the religion, but it really was, I'll tell you another example.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, Egypt, just a quick one.
Okay.
Egypt during its pharaonic time, women were rulers, women were queens. And after Islam and the Arabs conquered Egypt, Egypt never had one woman leader because Sharia forbids women from being heads of state. So this proves that the culture of Egypt was changed after Islam controlled Egypt.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I have a bit of a philosophical question. Cynthia, do you think Muslim women perhaps underestimate their potential because Muslim men overestimate theirs?
Well, I don't know if that's a philosophical question, but I agree with you. I think growing up, I didn't grow up in a Muslim culture, but the more I'm learning about it, I'm thinking, and we're just discussing about women's mindset. If you're told that you're deficient in intelligence, if you're treated less than legally and religiously and in every way, you have fewer opportunities as a woman. Of course, depending on your culture and how much freedom you're allowed, how strictly the Sharia law is enforced in your country. There have been periods when, in some countries, where women have been able to get education as we see today, but still have very strict guidelines to protect them, to protect the family honor. We're just thinking, if you're growing up in this culture, you probably don't know anything else. And this is the world, this is kind of the ocean that you're swimming in, is being taught this. And so you kind of internalize this view of yourself as a woman, I think, unless you are in a position where someone can tell you that there is actually another way to live. And if you're raised thinking that I must do these things to gain paradise, to gain honor for my family, and to gain the admiration, the love, maybe some connection with Allah, that I'm trying to be righteous, that I need to do these things, then it's ingrained in your mind. And thinking, okay, I'm doing this, I'm honoring God by being in this position as a woman. So one of the things that we were talking about also is just encouraging women and men all over the world to just read, as Nell said, to actually read the Hadith, read the Quran, really educate yourself and find out what it really says, what it says about men and women, what it says about God, and just how it kind of objectifies women and kind of puts them in this position.
Not to interrupt, yes, great feedback. We have Muhammad on the line here, and we have another caller, Ben, after Muhammad. Muhammad, are you there? Is Muhammad on air? Hello, Muhammad, are you there? Okay, it's Ben. It's Ben on the line.
Yeah.
Ben, you there? Okay. Yeah, your question?
Okay. Well, I just had one comment. Our speaker, a lady from Egypt, said earlier comments about our guidance for being husbands and wives in Christianity, and I thought there was one really important point that may not have been spoken. I'm reading Ephesians 5:25 here, and it says, this is the central verse to me. I'm just a layman, but this is the central verse to me of guidance. It says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The next sentence says, or the next verse, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed by the washing of the water with the word. So you're supposed to love your wife more than yourself, be willing to sacrifice yourself for her, and also be a leader of your household, in the way of Christ.
Can you repeat yourself, Ben? Your voice was not as clear.
So the central teaching that I know of from the Bible is Ephesians 5:24 through 27.
Correct.
And it says the husband's supposed to be the leader of the household. Verse 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So you're supposed to love your wife more than you love yourself and be willing ultimately to even sacrifice your life to save her, should it come down to that. And the next verse, so that I sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, you're supposed to lead your household in the way of Christ.
Correct.
And that's the central part of the teaching that I know of.
Correct. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it goes right into what we said before we started, spoke on that same biblical principle, and also Noonie Darwish has brought that up as well, that we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church, meaning we give ourselves for our wife as the same as Christ has given himself for the church, being Jesus is the example, which is why Islam and Christianity completely different. The God of Islam is not the God of Israel or the Bible. So it's very important to know that, and you see this when we talk about the difference in the family structure, when we talk about topics of wife beating, divorce, remarriage. When we speak about all these things, you see the difference that Christ will make in those areas in dealing with those particular topics. It's just fascinating.
All right, we have one more caller. Hamdan, are you there? What's your question?
Yes, please. Yes. I just have a comment on a clarification related to an earlier statement about culture and religion and the Middle East. And the Muslim doctrine dominates the Islamic culture. But the minority Christians in the Middle East abide by their own doctrine. The Maronites in Lebanon, the Assyrians in Syria, the Caledonians in Iraq, the Coptic Orthodox in Egypt, and the Roman Catholics in Egypt, and the Presbyterians in Egypt. All these abide by the Christian doctrine, the one wife to one husband, and their doctrine related to divorce and rights and so forth are guided by the church doctrine, not by the Islamic book. Just a clarification about that. So culture only controls, or Islamic culture, Islamic doctrine controls only those believers in Islam, but not the other minority Christians who are suffering, but they are living up to their book, the Bible, the Holy Bible.
Well, thank you very much. We have only a few minutes left, and so the way I'd like to close, Darwin, you had previously asked a question about solutions. Cynthia, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go to Nell, and then to Noonie, and then to Alex. And so I'm going to ask that you keep this very brief, since we've only got about 4 minutes left. If you were to start a conversation with a Muslim woman, how might you begin to dialogue with her so that she might begin to think about the claims of Christ compared to the claims of Muhammad in regards to her value?
Well, I would hopefully ask her if we have a relationship to see if she'd like to read some of the Bible with me and find out, read about Isha, read about Jesus, and what Jesus said about women, how he treated women. I think he's so loving and speaks the truth about who we are as human beings. They would see his love and his example in contrast better and say, perhaps, what is it that you're really, what is it you're working for? You know, what is your, how are you, you know, kind of empathize with what's going on in her life. Really friend her, really love her, try to show her the love of Christ, and hopefully more dialogue and relationship and fruit will come of that.
Yeah, I would say conversations for me would happen in a Western context, and I think Christians and Muslims perhaps share, in the American culture anyway, a concern for the family, what is happening to the family, what is happening to marriage in general. So perhaps start on common ground and talk about why those things are fundamental to society, and then start expounding on the differences, and then, like Cynthia said, a show from the Bible how married life in Christianity is different. But then also, and this I think is crucially important for us as Christians, and where we can pray for our brothers and sisters in the Middle East, that they would live consistently with that teaching, that their marriages and our marriages, and the way that we treat people of the different gender would really just be a shining light, and would be something that draw Muslims, almost like the movie and the marriage in the movie drew Nani to that idea that marriages all over the Middle East by minority believers, and here in America by believing Christians, would be just a great witness of what it should be to Muslims.
Nooni, you've got about 30 seconds. How would you dialogue with someone about their value?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would like to ask a Muslim woman if she's happy with Islam. Does she feel free in Islam? If she does, then I won't say anything. But if she wants to further discussion, I would like to tell her that if she wants to be free, she can be free in Christ. Christ will set her free.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Alex, you have the last word.
Oh, thank you. And I will speak, as I do that often, I will talk about only if Allah is through God. That's it. And then everything comes from that.
Okay. Well, this has been a great show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Darwin, Alex, Cynthia, Nell, Nooni. This has been a great topic. We've had a lot of interest. Please join us as we continue on with our International Christian Apologetics Week as we close up. Thank you for joining us. Have a good evening.